of the sidewalk. In Chicago, it felt like they were living at the bottom of a canyon. So the very first building ordinance was established, which required these buildings have a setback, meaning they could go up so far, then in, then up, then in, then up, like a staircase. That would allow more light and air down onto the sidewalk. The same thing's happening in New York at this time. Their buildings tend to look like wedding cakes. Ours tend to look like armchairs for giants, and we will see a couple of those along the river. So this is Art Deco, 1920s, 1930s. Other features of Art Deco are vertical lines, emphasizing the new height, and then a flat top, nothing to stop your eye as you're looking up. By 1940, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe has come from the Bauhaus School of Design in Germany, and he introduces the concept of less is more. He takes away all the ornamentation off the building and celebrates the materials, the metal and the glass. In fact, he puts the internal metal frame on the outside of the building. We're going to call him Mr. Box, because his buildings tend to look like boxes on stilts with a recessed glass lobby. It's called International or Mid-Century Modern Architecture, and it was popular starting in the 1940s into the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even beyond. And while Mies was a modernist and said less is more, the postmodernists who followed him said less is a bore. We want more. So the postmodernists put architectural details back on their buildings. But what they tend to do is look back at older architectural styles, update it, and modernize it. They also did what's called contextualism, taking into account their site and surroundings, in some way reflecting their neighbors or their neighborhood. But we are now in the 21st century, and one of our Chicago architecture critics has described two styles. One he calls deconstructionism, the other he calls visual expressionism. Now I think of deconstructionism as anything that's getting away from the box. It's been around since the 1940s, so we're going to see odd angles and odd shapes. And digital expressionism, I think of anything that is so complex it would be impossible or next to impossible to draw by hand. And we'll see examples of those two styles right at the beginning of our tour. So we're leaving Ogden Slip. We're going to be making a U-turn onto the main branch of the river. It runs about 2.25 miles, so if you walk the river walk, you'll know how far you've gone. We'll spend a little time on the north branch, a little time on the south branch, but if we could negotiate the entire Chicago River, we'd have to go 300 miles round trip. And as we go along, please notice our bridges and our bridge houses. Every one is different, especially the bridge houses, as are all designed in the era in which they were built. And our bridges, these all must go up on demand. That is a result of a Supreme Court decision that said the boats were here first, so the boats have the right of way. Now, it used to be that the sailboats could come in the spring going out to the lake for the season, or in the fall coming back, they could cut down anytime they wanted. So these bridge houses were manned 24 hours, 7 days a week. But in the 1990s, the cities got together with the boating community and said, let's have boat runs. So every Wednesday and Saturday in the spring and in the fall, we have boat runs. The boatsmen this fall now will join up here, and then we'll have a team of bridge workers on bridge 1, on bridge 2. They'll open up bridge 1, let the sailboats go through, close bridge 1. Open up bridge 2, let the sailboats go through, close bridge 2. Then team 1 has leapfrogged to bridge number 3, and they just work their way down. It's a very efficient way of maneuvering the boats through, so only one bridge is open at any one time, not only for traffic, but for emergency vehicles. But, oh, you guys, take a look over your left shoulder. The lock is open. So you see the flags there, and then move your eye to the right. The boat's going to block your view here in a second. As a matter of fact, the yellow boat is going to be going into the lock, I believe. So you guys want to keep an eye on the yellow boat. Is made up of 77 communities, but we further subdivide those communities into 100 neighborhoods. And the number of neighborhoods is actually increasing as we speak. But it's not because we're making any more land anymore. But we did at one point in time. All the land on your right and your left, all the way up to Michigan Avenue, that used to be Lake Michigan. Hence an avenue named Michigan along the lake named Michigan. So anything to the east of Michigan Avenue is all landfill or man-made land. So this first bridge, was always known as the Lakeshore Drive Bridge or the LSD Bridge. It's been renamed the Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Lakeshore Drive Bridge. It's the longest name of any bridge in the world. I'll tell you more about Du Sable a little bit later on in the tour. Art Deco bridge houses. This was built 1936. So let's start talking about some buildings. Up ahead and on our left, I'm going to talk about the three tallest buildings you see. They all three are connected to one another, clad in different shades of blue glass. It is the St. Regis. It's a hotel on the lower level and luxury luxury condominiums above. This is what I would call digital expression, digital expression, because every single balcony, or as you can see that it is not, the sides of the walls do not go straight up and down, but they go in and out and in and out. From the ground to the roof, this is the second tallest building in Chicago, but it only holds the title of the third tallest building. I'll explain that a little bit later on in the tour. Today, that building opened in 2021, and today, this is the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman. Very good, ladies. I usually have to prompt. Very good. So keep an ear out for all the women's names you're going to hear along the way. She's not the only one. Jeannie Gaines, she's a homegrown gal from Belvedere, Illinois. Now, if you'll notice on the top tower, up toward the top, there's 2 floors where there are no windows. That is not a mistake. That is an engineered blow-through. It's supposed to be there. So there's a lot of wind up there, and they are able to calculate, don't ask me how space to leave open to reduce the building from vibrating or from swaying. It keeps your chandeliers from swinging over your dining room table when you are entertaining. Now, when you move to Chicago and you buy the St. Regis, be sure you get from the 72nd floor up, because you can buy an entire floor, 360-degree views. Not bad. So again, this is the St. Regis. It is named after the hotel on the lower level, the St. Regis, and then again the luxury condominiums above. Right next door, the little colorful building is Gems Academy, a grammar and junior high school by, are you ready? Danielle Tillman. Very good. And then 2 buildings down, you'll see a building has black and silver horizontal lines. That is the Swiss Hotel by Harry Weiss, 1989. As we go by, you'll see the building is not a square, not a rectangle. It's a triangle-shaped building. Harry was an avid sailor, and he got a lot of his inspiration from the sailboat, the triangle, of course, being the shape of a sail. But functionally, that provides 2 sides of this building to have the beautiful views out onto the river. But take a look at the top of the Swiss Hotel at that curvilinear building poking over the top. I point that out even though that is not on the river. It was opened in the early 2000s. That's what I would call digital expressionism. Every single balcony is different, so you can imagine how difficult that would be to draw by hand. When that opened, that was the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman. Again, it's Jeannie Gang. Oh yeah, she could do angles, she could do curves. Her inspiration here were the layers of limestone that you find along rivers, and then the glass looks like water trickling down the side and eroding that limestone away. I actually love this building on the north side or on a cloudy day because I think the glass does look like it's water trickling down the side. I hope you will walk over to the Radisson Blue Hotel and look up, because the profiles of this building are breathtaking. So definitely go over and see Aqua. Up ahead and on our right, set back, is the NBC Tower by Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. It's a postmodern building. What do the postmodernists do? Look back at older architectural styles, update it, and modernize it. In this case, Art Deco. What does Art Deco have? Setbacks, vertical lines, and a flat top. So as we come under the bridge, take a look to your right. The building goes up so far, then it goes in, then it goes up, then it goes in, then it goes up. You'll see vertical lines created by the limestone, and then the windows and the spandrels above and below. And again, a flat top, nothing to stop your eye. So while this is officially a postmodern building, opened in 1989, it's often referred to as Eco Deco architecture, because it is echoing Art Deco from the 1920s and 30s. Now we're coming up on Michigan Avenue and the river. This is my favorite intersection in the entire city of Chicago. There's so much history there. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the tour. But right now we're going to talk about the 4 landmark buildings that flank the bridge, and we'll do some neck exercises. Are you ready? Up ahead and on our right, past the bridge, the white building with the clock tower, the Wrigley buildings, the building that Gum built. Graham Anderson, Probst and White are the architects. First office building built north of the river, first office building with the air condition. It's clad in 6 shades of white lace terracotta, getting lighter as you go to the top to draw your eye up to the clock tower. Now to the left, past the bridge, the building with the Roman temple at the top, the London Guarantee building, now the London House Hotel by Alfred Altschuler, 1924. Beautiful example of Beaux-Arts building. And then back to the right, as we come past the Fidelity building, set back is the Tribune Tower. This was built as an international competition to build the most beautiful office building in the world. More than 200 applications came in from 20 different countries. Howells and Hood from New York won the $50,000 prize. This building has just been converted into a residential building. So here we are on the right setback, the beautiful Tribune Tower. And then to the left, just before the bridge, is 333 North Michigan Avenue by Holbert and Root. This was inspired by the second place winner in the Tribune competition. So here we have first place and second place forever staring each other down across the river. So heading under the Michigan Avenue Bridge, another one of our double-decker bridges, directly ahead of you is a building that needs no introduction unless you cannot read 20-foot tall letters on the side of the building. Trump International Hotel and Tower by Adrian Smith of Skidmore, Owens and Merrill. This was actually his swan, the last building he designed for them before he went to Dubai and opened his own company. From the ground to the roof, this is the third tallest building in Chicago, but it holds the title of the second tallest building because he has a decorative spire at the top that he gets to count. Now this is a building on stilts with a recessed glass lobby, but it's not a box like International Mid-Century Modern. It's curved. And then it has setbacks like Art Deco, but those setbacks are contextual. They reference the height of 3 buildings in the neighborhood. Now if you build on the river today, you must provide public access. You must provide a river walk. Here we have a 3-level river walk with the bottom 2 floors unrented retail space. Now just about 2 weeks ago they announced they have finally rented some of the space to a restaurant. They said it's going to be Mediterranean cuisine. I don't know when it's going in, where it's going to be, how much space they're taking up, but we're going to be thrilled to finally have something in this empty space after so many years. After the Trump Tower is the last building designed by Mr. Box, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. We often call him Mies. It is a box on stilts with a recessed glass lobby, originally built for the International Business Machine Company, or IBM. Lower level is now a 5-diamond hotel called the Langham with office space above. Again, mid-century modern, less is more. Internal level frame on the outside of the building. And then beyond Mises' building is these twin towers, these curvilinear buildings, are Marina City by Bertrand Goldberg. These were built in the 1960s when nobody wanted to live on the river. Goldberg was actually a student of Mr. Box, but apparently he missed the class on right angles. He said there are no right angles in nature, should be done in architecture. He built what he called a city within a city. When these opened, there was not only the marina, the parking, and the apartments, there was an ice skating rink, a bowling alley, a swimming pool, a movie theater, shops, restaurants, a bar, radio programs that broadcast from here. He called these as tree houses, with the center being the trunk, the apartments being the branches, and the balconies being the leaves. And while these are officially called Marina City or Marina Towers, as we get under the bridge, take another look. I think you'll understand why Chicagoans refer to them as the corn cob buildings. Marina City. To our left, the green gray building is by Kevin Roche, an Irish American, and I love that an Irishman has designed a green building. This is a postmodern building supposed to be column within a column within a column. If you draw your eye across the base of the building and then up the corners, I think you'll see how he interpreted that. Silver lines in the windows, those are mullions. That brightens up the facade. This was the home of Leo Burnett, the original madman, advertising company. They brought us his characters as Tony the Tiger, Charlie the Tuna, the Pillsbury Doughboy, Keebler Elves, and Snap, Crackle, and Pop. As we come under the bridge to the left, the second building is a light gray building by Ricardo Bofield out of Spain. This was the first building he ever designed in the United States. Now look at the bottom of the building, look at the decoration around the windows and the doors, and now look at the top of the building. Now imagine taking out all the floors in between, putting the top on the bottom, and what have you got? A Greek temple. So he's reaching back thousands of years for his inspiration, taking a Greek temple and stretching it out some 40 stories. This is one of my favorite buildings at night. It's beautifully lit. This was the home of R.R. Donnelley, one of the largest publishing companies in the world. They used to print the phone books. Who remembers phone books? Where are my pages? Okay. Up ahead and on our right, a red brick building, we think warehouse, we think adaptive reuse. This was a wholesale grocery warehouse called the Reed Murdoch Center. George Nimmons was the architect. And you'll see that at the top of the building there's a clock tower. Very common to have clock towers in old buildings, as most people could not afford pocket watches. But if you count the number of windows to the left and the right of the clock tower, you'll see the building's a little lopsided. It's because they removed an entire bay of windows on the far end when they widened LaSalle Street and installed the LaSalle Street Bridge. But when I was growing up, this was the most dreaded building in Chicago. This was the home of traffic court. Not that I was ever there, of course, I've just heard stories. Up ahead and on our right is 400 North LaSalle Street. This is a LEED certified building. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's an effort to get developers to want to build green buildings that reduce their carbon footprint. There are 4 levels: certified silver, gold, and platinum. This is a platinum level, our highest level. And in fact, in 2018, Chicago was rated a LEED certified city because we have more LEED certified buildings and more square footage of green roofs than any other city in the United States. Beyond the bridge on our right, this huge building coming up is the Merchandise Mart. Built by Marshall Field, one of our retailers. He spent $30 million building this building. It opened in 1930. Probably a bit more like $1 billion in his insurance or in his money. It was again where he consolidated his wholesale warehouses. But 1930, it's a bad time. We are in a depression. He needs to get this off his books. He sells it to Joseph P. Kennedy, the father of President Kennedy. He buys it for the bargain basement price of $13 million. Kennedy's held on to it in the 1990s when they sold it for a modest profit of more than $600 million. It is worth more than $1 billion today. Art Deco building, Graham Anderson, Coastal White are the architects. You see the vertical lines, the flat top, and the setbacks. And then this decoration around the top and the bottom, also very typical of Art Deco architecture. Now, directly ahead of us, you'll see 3 buildings. On the left is the Salesforce Tower building. On the right is Wolf Point East. And if you look in between them, there's a building in the back. That is Wolf Point West. Wolf Point West was the first building built on this little spit of land, and it's a residential building. So the people moved in and lived on this side of the building. They had a beautiful view down the main branch of the river. That is until Salesforce Tower went up at Wolf Point East, and they've lost their view. It's a very common theme along the river. You are never guaranteed your views, and you always have to ask questions. So up ahead, this is where the 3 branches of the river join. Again, we're on the main branch. Up ahead and on the right is the north. Up ahead and on the left is the south. They form the letter Y. You'll see the letter Y all over the city, either right side up or upside down. Now you know why. In fact, if you look at the railing here at Wolf Point, you'll see some circles with the letter Y right in the center. Now this is where Chicago really started. In early 1800s, there's a bar, a tavern, and a saloon on these 3 points, and a boat that went between the 3 of them so you could bar hop. Take a look at the lobby of Salesforce Tower. You see the back window, the back wall? Those are huge LED screens, and that is really pretty today. They have all sorts of pictures that they show. Sometimes it's a mountain, sometimes it's flowers, sometimes it's kind of op art. It's one of my favorite lobbies here in the city of Chicago. So I think we're going to be heading on to the North Branch of the river first, and when we do, North Branch is mostly residential, and these neighborhoods probably have the most restaurants per square foot than any other neighborhood in the city. As we make our turn here, soon to be directly ahead of us, and then on our left, is another residential building. It's called River Bend. This was by DiStefano, and it's an interesting location because behind this building, there are railroad tracks that run right at the ground level. And I guess the developers and the architects said nobody's going to want to listen to these trains all day and all night long. So the back of the building, that's where all the mechanicals are, the elevators, the halls, and the stairs. So that everybody that bought into this building bought a beautiful view down the main branch of the river. Oh, until Wolf Point West got built and they lost their views. As I said, a very common theme along the river. Lower level here, these are townhouses where the frosted glass is. That is where their parking garage is. They actually have an elevator for their car. Take their car up to their floor. Beyond River Bend, I see a red brick building. We think warehouse, we think adaptive reuse. This is the oldest building on the river. Started construction in the late 1800s, and when it was finished, it had no windows. This was the North American Cold Storage Building, an icebox to temporarily store food. But in the 1970s, they decided to convert it into a residential building, so they had to cut in holes for the windows and the balconies. But they discovered the walls were 4 feet thick, filled with frozen horsehair and cork. That was the insulation. It took them 6 months to thaw it all out. There's the train right behind us. See it right at ground level? It took them 6 months to thaw it all out and remove the material. If you look where the balconies are, you'll see how thick those walls are. Beyond Fulton House, I see lots of triangles, lots of portholes. This has got to be a Harry Weiser architect sailor. Indeed, it is. These are the river cottages, built in the 1980s. Now, these guys had to be pioneers, wanting to live on the river in the 1980s, because the river at that time was rated as toxic, which is beyond polluted. They bought raw space, spent between $300,000 and $600,000, and then had to finish the interiors themselves. These have been owned by the original owners until one sold just a few years ago for $2.25 million. Now, as I said, at the time the river was rated as toxic. It's also the time when the Friends of the Chicago River was formed, a not-for-profit. The idea of teaching us how to bring this river back. At the time, there were fewer than 8 species of fish, and one of those was a goldfish. Today, we have almost 80, and we also have mammals, amphibians, reptiles, birds, insects, plants, all making their home in and around the Chicago River. It is a huge success story. We're very proud of it. To the right, this is the East Bank Club, the largest health club in the city, 4,000 members. This is a building that had turned its back on the river. It used to have no windows. But again, it was built in the 1980s. Nobody wants to look or smell this river. But now that the river's come back, they've cut in these windows and really embraced the river walk. As you can see, you can come here and rent kayaks and canoes. It's sitting in a neighborhood called River North. So named because it is north of the main branch of the river. But as you can see, it is also along the north branch. So this was the perfect place for warehouses. And that's what stood here for about 100 years. By the 1950s, a lot of these companies had moved or gone out of business. This became kind of a skid row and a starving artist colony. And then in the 1980s and 90s, when people started moving back into the city, they had their eye on this neighborhood because location, location, location. Live here, walk across the river, go to work. What a great commute. So either the old buildings were torn down and these high-rises were built, or the old buildings were converted into lofts, which we'll see coming up beyond the next bridge on our right. Now, I often get the question, what's the difference between an apartment, a condo, and a loft? An apartment you rent, a condo you own. A loft you can either rent or own. The difference is in the floor plan. So up ahead, the red brick building that you'll see, you'll notice that other than the corners, these units only have windows on one side. And in Chicago, you must provide light and air into your bedroom. So if you buy here, you're either buying a completely open floor plan, or you can put your bedroom next to the windows, or if you insist on having some separation, the wall cannot go all the way up to the ceiling. And how high it is determined by your square footage of windows and where you are placing the wall. Now, is there a wall police? No. And they have done, I know lots of people live here, they've done everything but that is the letter of the law. You can also tell the buildings that have been converted into lofts as opposed to built like this because their balconies are literally hanging off the side of the building. These are called the river lofts. Now to the left, this site is one of 7 developments that are planned along the river. And when I mean development, I mean commercial, retail, and residential space. This is just in the area that we're going to cover today, these 7 developments. This doesn't include things farther north, farther south, or out into the neighborhoods. They tell us when these 7 developments are finished, it will increase the number of residential units by 40,000. Huge. Okay, up ahead and on our right, we're going to be passing a park called Aaron Montgomery Ward Park. It's named after Montgomery Ward, who owned a department store here in Chicago. But he had an idea. He said, you know what, you shouldn't have to come all the way downtown to go shopping. You can live anywhere in the United States. I'll send you a catalog. You can order anything you need for your house, including your house. It would come as a kit and be delivered to you in the mail. 1872. Emmett's got nothing on Montgomery Ward. So here we are at the park. The 2 green buildings closest to the river are Erie on the Park and Kingsbury on the Park by Lewistown Lagrange out of France. And then the building with the blue glass and the concrete corners just past the water tower. That is the newest of the Montgomery Ward headquarters, now converted into lofts. It's called the Montgomery. Minoru Yamasaki is the architect. He is the one that designed the original World Trade Center buildings in New York City. But as an office building, it's a little weird. What is it missing? Where do you want your offices? On the corners. Yeah, there are no corner offices in this building. Montgomery Ward said, nobody gets a corner office, not even me. We are all working for the same company, so let's work together. And I love that philosophy. So here we are at the park. It's a very lively park. They have a playground, they have a pet park, they show movies at night during the summer, they have farmers markets, and as you can see, they've really embraced the Riverwalk. It's a lovely green space among all these new high-rises. And in fact, all the developments that I mentioned are all required to have a certain percentage of their footprint open space, not just for the residents, but for anybody. So parks are very important to the city of Chicago, to Chicagoans. On our left, this is the home of the future Bally's Casino Complex. Don't even get me started. As you can imagine, these guys are not thrilled. In fact, this hotel was supposed to be on the north end where we had minimal blocking of the views. and they discovered they could not, the ground there would not hold it. So they just moved it over here without telling anybody. They are not happy, but it is what it is. It's supposedly going to open next year. I don't know. We will see. Okay, on our right, these two residential buildings. This is another example of something that's going on in contemporary architecture, and that's color in the building, but not in the glass, in the material. This is precast concrete, and you can see some of it has been dyed yellow, and when it gets wet, it's even more vibrant, and it brings some interest to what I think would otherwise would be a relatively dull facade. Beyond these two residential buildings is the oldest of the Montgomery Ward headquarters. This was designed by a company architect. It's an Art Deco building. You'll see the vertical lines, the flat top, the setbacks. By the way, the number of setbacks and where they go is all determined by the footprint of your building. So the higher you go, the bigger the footprint, the more setbacks you will need. Now you'll see this building is built right up to the edge of the sidewalk, and they wanted a river walk. But to extend out into the river, you have to get permission from the United States Congress. These are federal waterways. And they thought, oh, we're not even going to bother. We'll just cut out the first floor of the building and we'll walk along the river underneath the building. I think it's an ingenious solution. And then the next building on our right, this is the old Montgomery Ward warehouse. This is where they would have fulfilled your orders. This building is so long, the employees wore roller skates to get from one end of the building to the other. This is a prairie-style building. You'll see the horizontal lines of red brick that encircle the building. But the terracotta is actually more of an Art Deco detailing. And once again, they got their riverwalk underneath the building. Now, directly ahead of us and soon to be on our right is another man-made inlet. They were digging out clay to make bricks when the city was being built. They went about a mile north, turned left, joined with the north branch of the river, creating the one and only island on the Chicago River. It's called Goose Island, so named because the Irish immigrants that settled there and raised geese. Now this used to be all warehouses, and for many years I said this would be a great place for a development. And we come back this year, the beginning of this year, we find a lot of the warehouses are gone. This is going to be development number 2 along the river called Halstead Point. Now as we come around the corner here, I want you to look up the north branch of the river. You will see a barge, at least one barge. I see one right now. There's probably another one there. I point that out to prove to you that this is still a working river. We are still bringing some goods in and out of the city, on the river. That's a concrete facility. Oh, now you can see 2 barges. One is empty. Can you see how high it is on the river? When we come around the corner, you'll see it. One is much lower. It's full of gravel. So they're bringing up gravel for the aggregate. And then look to your left, up off into the distance, there's 3 gray glass buildings. That is development number 3 along the river called Lincoln Yards, and you can see it is well underway. Now as we're making our U-turn here, I invite you to go get something to drink or make a pit stop. I'm not going to point out any buildings for a while until we get on the south branch of the river, but I am going to talk about Chicago history. If you're interested, you'll still be able to hear me downstairs. So please feel free to go get something to drink, wet your whistle, or make a pit stop. So we know that there were people here as much as 12,000 years ago. That's 10,000 BCE. They were primarily the council of the 3 fires, the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. But there were many other tribes here in the area, including the Miami, the Fox, the Ho-Chunk, the Illini. They lived here in relative peace for thousands of years. And while today Chicago is built on a north-south, east-west grid, we do have a couple of diagonal streets. Those are old Native American trails. Those were the shortcuts from village to village. The first Europeans didn't come until 1667. That was Father Marquette and Louis Joliet. We say Joliet. Don't ask me why. They were sent by the King of France to explore a water route to North America. They came out of New France, aka Canada, wound up on the Mississippi River, got about as far as where the Arkansas River joined, where the Native Americans said, go no further. The Spanish are below. Well, the French were worried that their diaries and their maps would be stolen, so they said, we better head back home. Well, the Native Americans said, we got a little shortcut for you. Head back up the Mississippi, turn right on what we now know as the Illinois River, turn left on what we now know as the Des Plaines River. You'll see a small portage about 8 miles where you'll have to carry your canoe across a mud lake, and you'll wind up on the Chicago River. So they followed those instructions, and guess where they wound up? My favorite intersection, the entire city of Chicago, Michigan Avenue and the river. Remember, that was the edge of Lake Michigan? They stood on the beach and they said, this would be a great place for a city. They understood the strategic nature of the waterways. They both made note in their diaries and they left, and they never came back. It was more than 100 years later before the next non-native showed up. His name was Jean-Baptiste Pointe du Sable. We say du Salbo, don't ask me why. He was a native of Haiti. His mother was a slave, his father was a mariner, aka pirate. Du Sable went to Europe to be educated, sailed back across the Atlantic, wound up in New Orleans, headed up the Mississippi River where those Native Americans told him about that little shortcut. So he followed those instructions, and guess where he wound up? My favorite intersection in the entire city of Chicago, Michigan Avenue and the river. Again, that's the edge of Lake Michigan. He stood on the beach and he said, this would be a great place for a city. And this would be a great place for me. So he became the first permanent non-native resident in the area, now considered the founder of the city of Chicago. So that's about 1779. 1803, a U.S. military fort is built here to protect what was then known as the Northwest Territories, even though we're smack dab in the continent. And I will give you one guess as to where it was built. My favorite intersection in the entire city of Chicago, Michigan Avenue and the river. In fact, if you go back to Michigan Avenue, on the south side of the river, look at the sidewalk on all four corners. You'll see metal plaques that trace the outline of the fort. And on the London Guarantee Building, the one with the Roman temple at the top, on the wall is a small plaque, and above the door is a large bas-relief that shows you what the fort looked like. So again, that's 1803. 1812, the Native Americans aligned themselves with the British during the war, and there was a plot to overtake the fort. There are about 100 residents, both military and civilians, both men, women, and children. They were ordered to evacuate and head to a fort in Indiana known as Fort Wayne. They got about 2 miles south of the river when about 500 Native Americans came over a sand dune and killed most of them. Some of the survivors were traded as prisoners of war, and others were kept as slaves. So that's 1812. 1818, Illinois becomes a state in the Union. We are not even on the long list, let alone the short list for state capitals, because we're not even a blip on the map at this point in time. But that is going to change. 1825, the Erie Canal opens up. That brings shipping in from the Atlantic into the Great Lakes. And what do ships bring? People. So our population starts to grow. 1833, the town is founded. 1837, the city is incorporated. And the name Chicago is a Native American word. It comes from the Algonquin language. And we thought it meant great and powerful, which is kind of a nice thought. But it was only after all the I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed, and the ink had dried that we discovered Chicago really means wild, smelly onion. So we're the wild, smelly onion city, and we are proud of it, I will say. So again, that's 1837. 1848, the Illinois and Michigan Canal is dug. That brings shipping in from the Great Lakes into the Illinois River system. And what do ships bring? People, so our population grows. At the same time, the railroads come. And what do trains bring? People, so again, our population grows. 1871 had a little fire. I will tell you about that on the south branch of the river. 1880s, the U.S. Congress is debating whether to have a World's Fair to commemorate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus bumping into North America. Well, we thought this would be a great way to put our name back on the map. The world has written us off after the fire. So we sent our finest politicians to Washington, D.C. to argue our case. And I guess they did a great job of talking up the city. Because the story goes there was a newspaper reporter from New York who referred to them as those windbags from Chicago, which is where we get our nickname. Pretty good class, the Windy City. That's not from our weather, it's from our politicians who are so full of hot air, a fine tradition we continue today. Well, we were granted the fair in 1893, and I always have to ask, has anybody read the book, The Devil and the White City? Very good, you have not broken my record yet. Thank you. It is a historic novel, but it is two true stories. One is about the fair, which I always say if we could rebuild the fair today, just the way it was, and even as 21st century people, we would be so amazed. If you wanted to see every exhibit on the fair, you would have to walk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 weeks, and you would walk 300 miles. Lots of firsts were introduced. Cracker Jack was introduced. Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, Juicy Fruit gum, the first automatic dishwasher, the first moving sidewalk. Next time you're at the airport, think of Chicago. You go on and on and on. But it was also the story of what was thought to be the first known serial killer in the United States, H.H. Holmes. Came to Chicago, built a little hotel by the fair, invited young ladies to come stay, never to be seen from again. There are at least 50 people reported missing from Chicago at the time that have been linked to homes. But there is a new book. It's a nonfiction book, very well researched, called The True Story of the White City Devil. And this author has gone through every single case to determine if it's true, not true, or we don't have enough evidence one way or the other. So read both books, they're really good. Another good book about Chicago is City of the Century. It's all about Chicago's growth in the 1800s. We were the fastest growing city in the world and the fastest growing city in the history of mankind. Now up ahead we have a bridge up, and I always get people asking why are some of the bridges up. Well, that's a bridge that's no longer used. But remember I told you these bridges must go up on demand? So if that's your bridge, you either have to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That would be annoying. You could dismantle it, that would be expensive, or you could just put it up and leave it up, and that's what they choose to do. This is an old railroad bridge. The railroad tracks are still underneath all the buildings along the main branch of the river. They used to go all the way out to Navy Pier. They say they bring this bridge down once a year. That maintains their access over the river should they ever want to or be able to use this bridge ever again. So we're leaving the north branch of the river, again, mostly residential. We're passing the River Cottages, Fulton House, and River Bend. And the next couple of buildings I'm going to talk about are all commercial office buildings. So this is where people go to work. So we're heading downtown, or what we call our loop. And the first two buildings I want to talk about were both opened in 2017. Both of them are LEED certified buildings. The first one is directly ahead of us. Maybe a little bit hard to see from here, but it has a very narrow base and then spreads out before it goes up. So some people call this the pencil, or the champagne flute, or the upside down wine bottle. I call it unstable. I don't know how this thing is standing. To me, it would look like asking me to stand on one foot for the rest of my life. But there is a reinforced concrete core. That is not enough to keep this building from swaying. So how did they solve the problem? On the top of the building there are water tanks that hold 250,000 gallons of water. So if the building goes left, the water goes right, and it neutralizes the movement. It's ingenious engineering. And in fact, Jeannie Gang's St. Regis also uses liquid damping. And then to our right, this is River Bend. You'll notice this, again, 2017 LEED certified building. You'll see the parabolic arch on the front of the building. And if you look carefully, you'll see the glass is slanted in toward the base. That's so it reflects what's here at the turning basin as opposed to what's down the river. We'll be reflected in that glass on our way back to our dock. And then the piece of artwork in front, this red swirl, is by Santiago Calatrava. He is actually an architect that designed this beautiful piece. It's called Constellation. When they installed that, they bent one of the pieces. It took them a year to manufacture a new piece and get it installed here on the river. So we're heading under the Lake Street Bridge, another one of our double-decker bridges. This one carries the elevated train on the top. And we're going to be going by 150 North Riverside Plaza. This is one of my favorite lobbies, by the way. If you guys are not doing lobby tours, you're missing so much of the beauty of our buildings. If you're over in this neighborhood, definitely go in and see their lobby. Now, everybody get your cameras ready, get ready for your close-up, because we're going to be reflected in this building. Again, get your cameras ready, get ready for your close-up. There we are. Everybody wave. So again, this is 150 North Riverside Plaza by Getchin Associates, two-level river walk. The top level is a pedestrian walkway, lower level is outside dining for your restaurant. So Getchin Associates are the architects. They are also the architects for the newest building on the river. So you've seen the oldest one, now you're going to see the newest one. Up ahead and on our right, past the bridge, Bank of America building, just opened 2 years ago. And one of the things I love about this building is the facade along the river, because it's not flat. You'll see it runs parallel to the river, then juts out toward the river, then parallel, and then out, and parallel, and out. And what does that create? Corner offices all the way down the face of this building. So this building has an average of 14 corner offices on every floor, and of course corner offices, much more income for the building owners. It's an ingenious design. Beyond the bridge on our left is the first building. It's going to look like an armchair for a giant. It's the Civic Opera Building. This was paid for by Samuel Insull. He was Thomas Edison's secretary for many years. came to Chicago, brought us electricity, also consolidated our public transportation. So as you come under the bridge, imagine yourself sitting where the air conditioner unit is. That, of course, was not originally there. Leaning back against the center tower, resting your arms on either side, maybe dangling your toes in the river. This is often referred to as Insule's throne. So Civic Opera House is now the home of the Lyric Opera. They do a nice behind-the-scenes tour if anybody is interested. Okay, on the right, all the buildings we're passing are all built over railroad tracks. The railroad said, we not only own the land, but we own the space above it, and we'll be glad to sell you empty space if you can figure out how to build a building. It's called air rights construction. So beyond the bridge, the next 5 buildings were all designed by the same architecture firm over a period of 20 years, and they span 4 city blocks. The first 2 buildings are twin towers, Gateway 1 and Gateway 2. They're boxes on stilts with a recessed glass lobby. International, mid-century, modern. Less is more. You would naturally think Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, but you would be wrong. It's Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, often lovingly referred to as the 3 blind knees, because they copied these vinyl styles so very often. But you can see underneath the buildings, there's a train right there. Not only the metro trains that are local trains, but also Amtrak trains that go all over the country. Now take a look down the river and then off to the left about 11 o'clock and up as high as you can, because that's your first view of 1,451 feet of, may have a moment of silence for the Sears Tower. Thank you. Willis Tower. Willis is an insurance underwriter. They've insured such vehicles as the Titanic and the Hindenburg. But I digress. Sears Tower was the tallest building in the world for 25 years. Still the tallest building in Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, the Midwest, the United States, North America, and the Western Hemisphere until just a few years ago. Does anybody know what took its title in the United States? Do I have any New Yorkers? Freedom Center. But I object, Your Honor. The top of Freedom Center is an antenna. You can't count antennas. You can't count flagpoles. Those are temporary. So what do? They put a decorative spire over the top, like you saw at Trump Tower, so they get to count that. They are 1,776 feet to the top. We still have the highest observation deck in the Western Hemisphere. Now as we come under the bridge to our right, this is Gateway 3, an internal metal frame with precast concrete on the outside. The entrance to Union Station, beautifully restored lobby. If anybody remembers the Untouchable movie with Kevin Costner, you remember the baby buggy scene? That was filmed in Union Station. And then beyond Gateway 3, there's a little green building with X bracing on the side. That's the former Mid-American Commodities Exchange building. They needed unobstructed views on the trading floor, so there's no internal support for that roof inside the building. It's the X bracing that's holding up the roof. And Fajr Khan, an engineer out of Bangladesh working with Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, is the one that invented it. He's often referred to as the Einstein of structural engineering. And then beyond the bridge on our right is Gateway 4, a postmodern building. It is contextual. You'll see a swoop in the facade that follows a little change in the river. Green glass, the color of the river, and mirrored glass. As you can see that it is reflecting its neighbors in kind of a kaleidoscope effect, including the building across the way here on our right. This is a building we never used to talk about, because this used to be 400 feet of raw concrete. So as we come under the bridge, can you tell me what's on there now? It's a map, good, of the river, the Chicago River. You see the Y? But wait, what's the red box there? You are here. It's that building on the map. Don't you love those, you guys? And this was actually designed by Maria Rizzoldo out of New York. Very good, very good. And we appreciate the gentlemen who are supporting the women. Take a look right at the river's edge here. This is a map of Route 66 from Chicago to California. This year is the 100th anniversary of Route 66. So we come under the bridge to our right. This is the old main post office. Busiest post office in the world for many years, because all the mail order catalog companies that were here. If you ever get the Sears Wish Book at Christmas time, it came through this post office. Then closed and reopened as an office building. Now if you go to the Willis Tower, see if you can find the roof of this building, because there's a 2.5-acre park. It has a running track, a basketball court, a pickleball court, a tennis court, places to sit and so forth. It's only open to the tenants, because you can't rent the entire roof for private events. Now up ahead, you'll see this street that goes across the river. It goes right through the middle of the post office. That was a result of a plan for the city of Chicago in 1909 by Daniel Burnham. He imagined Paris on the prairie. He wanted a grand boulevard heading from outside. When they built the post office, they built it with a hall to accommodate what we now know as the Eisenhower Expressway. But to the left, that part of the street has been renamed after one of my heroes, Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells was born into slavery, emancipated after the war. By the time she was a teenager, she was an orphan. She wound up raising her younger siblings while she went to college. She became a teacher, and then she came to Chicago for that Columbian exhibition. But she was not here to have fun. She was here to protest the lack of representation of women and people of color at the fair. She eventually bought a newspaper, became an investigative reporter. She became the voice in the United States for the anti-lynching movement and for inequality of any kind. She was not afraid to walk into the mayor's office, the governor's office, or the office of the president of the United States and tell them exactly what she thought. She spoke all over the country. She even went to England. But sadly, it was 90 years after her death before she was finally awarded a Pulitzer citation. Ida B. Wells, again, one of my personal heroines. Absolutely. Up ahead on our right is development number 4 along the river. And I'll let you guess as to which of the new buildings was the first one built here. The one all the way in the back. And they had a nice view for a while. When they built front of that and built front of that. Now, is there anybody that would like to live in a high-rise building? Raise your hand. Okay. Would you live in one that's 20 stories tall? 40? 60? 80? Would you live in one that's 80 stories tall made out of wood? Because that's what's going to be built right here at the Riverwalk. It is laminated wood. They say it is cheaper and sturdier than iron and steel. When I win the lottery, you'll see me right up there. This is the inside. To me, this is like a piece of artwork. I absolutely love this. We'll see. All right. Now, up ahead on our left, past the Reed, you'll see a curvilinear building. That's River City by Bertrand Goldberg. He's the same one that designed the corncob buildings on the main branch of the river. This was supposed to be 6 72-story buildings that would serpentine down the river. But he's building in the 1980s when nobody wants to live downtown, nobody wants to live on the river, and it's toxic, and nobody wanted to live in this neighborhood. This was all warehouses. This was called Printers Row, because all the printing and publishing companies that were here. So this was the only residential building here. They had no services down here whatsoever. But before all of this construction started, we of course knew about the project, so I gave a little real estate advice to our guests. I said, if you want to make some money, buy in River City right now, because prices are as low as they're going to go. They're only going to go up because they're going to be in a great new neighborhood. Well, somebody took me up on it, but he said, I just don't want one unit. I want them all. He went to the owners, they fought back and forth. He finally offered about $500,000 per unit. So those have been now reopened as rentals, which is what most of the new construction is, unless it's very high real estate. It's rentals as opposed to condominiums. Now, I am going to break the cardinal rule of tour guiding right now, and that is I'm going to talk about something you cannot see. But it's such an important spot down here on the south branch of the river, we can't be down here and not talk about it. So off to the west about 4, now I just told you could not see it, actually, if you know what to look for, you could see it, especially if you're tall. But anyway, about 4 blocks to the west is the former homestead of Patrick and Catherine O'Leary. Now, does anybody recognize that name as it relates to Chicago history? I'm getting a couple of nods, a hand back there. What if I said Mrs. O'Leary and her cow? Does that ring a bell or a cow bell? Now, yeah, I'm going to get it. So that's where the Chicago fire started. Supposedly, Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern in the barn. We know that is not true. It did start in her barn, burned her barn, not her house, burned for 36 hours, jumped the river twice. In its wake, it destroyed 17,000 buildings. Between 200 and 300 people died, but 100,000 people, that was a third of our population, were left homeless. The Tuesday afternoon after the fire went out, the first building was rebuilt. It was a shack built by a real estate agent, and over the door he had a sign that said, all gone, but wife, children, and energy, and that became the battle cry. When the newspapers were finally printed again, they quoted the mayor as saying, fear not, Chicago shall rise again. And in fact, we built a second city on the ashes, which is where we get our nickname. Excellent, class. Second city. It's not because we're second to anyone in the world, it's because we built a second city on the ashes of the first. On the site of Mrs. O'Leary's homestead today, the Chicago Fire Academy. You want to be a firefighter, you go to school in the very spot where the Chicago fire started. Now up ahead and on our right, this is probably the most endangered building in the city of Chicago. This is an old coal-burning power plant. It served Union Station, owned by Amtrak. I think it's for sale, so if anybody's interested, I think this would make a great railway museum because the railroads were such an important part of our growth, and it's right here among all the railroads. So if anybody's interested, let me know. As we make our turn here, look down past the bridge, and you'll see another green area. That's development number 5 along the river. That's going to be called the 78, referencing the 78th community or the 78th neighborhood. It's also where they are building the new stadium for our men's professional soccer team, ironically called the Fire. And as we make our turn here, I want you to take a look at Roosevelt Collection. This is a little development that started back in the 1990s. And everybody wave to the folks at the Roosevelt Collection. Say hi. Actually say goodbye, because they are losing their views. Because right in front of it is double number 6 along the river. They've had a good run. They can't complain. But again, you're never guaranteed your view along the river. All right, so as we are headed back up the south branch of the river, next couple of buildings I'm going to talk about are not on the river. They're on LaSalle Street. I'm going to point out the tops of the buildings. And LaSalle Street is my favorite street for going in and out of lobby. So I highly recommend that you do a lobby tour. I would start at the Chicago Board of Trade. LaSalle Street literally dead ends at the Chicago Board of Trade. It's an Art Deco building, so it looks like an armchair for a giant. Beautiful Art Deco lobby. If you go by the elevators, you're going to think Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire are going to come dancing around the corner. Who remembers Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire? Okay, very good. Across the street is the Federal Reserve Bank. They have a free money museum. That is, the museum's free, not the money. You do have to go through security like at the airport, but once you're in, there's all sorts of interactive exhibits for kids and adults of all ages. And you can take your picture with 1,000,000 single-dollar bills. And how big of a pile of money do you think that is? It's pretty big. And then across the street from that is the Rookery. The lobby was redesigned by Frank Lloyd Wright. The Frank Lloyd Wright Trust is there, and they give tours of that building if you are a Frank Lloyd Wright fan. Now the first building I'm going to point out, you can't see quite yet. You won't be able to see it until we get by the reed. But I'm going to describe the lobby to try and encourage you to do a lobby tour. So it is a 4-story vaulted lobby. The ceiling is 24 karat gold. The walls and the floors are rusted cream-colored marble. On one end of the building is a piece of artwork by Cairo. It's called Chicago Fugue, and it looks like a deconstructed organ. And then on the other end is amphitheater seating. If you go sit down, you'll hear very quiet music, but if you move around, the music will change. You are literally conducting the music. There's also a coffee shop in there, so literally you walk in and all of your senses are stimulated. It's well worth going to see. So that is 190 South LaSalle Street. Philip Johnson is the architect. And again, we're not going to see it until we get past the reed. I will let you know when I can see it. Again, LaSalle Street is my favorite street for lobbies. Oh, there are some rules about doing a lobby tour. Number 1, introduce yourself to the guards. Tell them you're there to admire their lobby and ask if you can take pictures, because there are some buildings that do not allow photography, especially the banks aren't fond of you taking surveillance photos. And then when you walk in, you want to look at the floors, the walls, the ceilings, the light fixtures, the sconces, the elevators inside and out, the mailboxes, and even some of the buildings and the decoration starts on the sidewalk, and of course their facades or the doorways are absolutely gorgeous. So definitely do a lobby tour. Michigan Avenue between, like, say, Randolph and about Roosevelt Road, not even that far, Ida B. Wells. Again, great lobbies to see. So as we come by the reed, about 1 o'clock off the bow, I will let you know when I can see it, is a tall building with a very steep green gabled roof. Again, it's 190 South LaSalle Street by Philip Johnson. It is a postmodern building because the top of it is a duplicate of the original Masonic temple that was built just north of my beloved Marshall Field department store, now a Macy's. I see it right now, so get ready. About 1 o'clock, again, a steep green gabled roof. Again, the top looked like the old Masonic temple, built just north of my beloved Marshall Field's department store, now a Macy's, a 4-letter word. And then to the right of that, you'll see a tan building with a charcoal pyramidal roof and a statue at the top. That's the Chicago Board of Trade. That's where you can start your lobby tour. And then just go up one side, down the other, or back and forth, whichever you prefer. The statue at the top is a statue of Ceres. She's the goddess of grain. And where we get our word? Cereal. John Storr was the artist. He said, I'm not going to put a face on the statue. There will never be a building tall enough to see her eye to eye. Oops. This was the tallest building in Chicago for 25 years, built 1930. Next high-rise was built in 1955 after World War II. And then right in front of it, you're going to see a gray glass building, also with a pyramidal roof. That's by Helmut Jahn, and that's the new Board of Trade. Again, a postmodern building. So he's taking the old pyramidal roof off the old Board of Trade and expanding it and putting it on the new Board of Trade. Now, this development on our right, this is by Perkins and Will. They are also the architects for the next building coming up on the river, this gray building with the irregular-sized balconies. That is a postmodern building. Those balconies mean something. That's contextual. The little balconies represent the cars, and the big balconies represent the trucks that are running on the Eisenhower Expressway right in front of that building. Taking a nod to the transportation that's right in front of them. Now, as we come under the bridge, the Sears Tower, that is not one building, that is 9 buildings put together on a 3x3 grid. The idea is a building that tall is like trying to stand a straw up on a table. The slightest movement or breeze and it's going to fall over. But if you take 9 straws and put a rubber band around it and set it on the table, do you get the idea? It's called bundling construction. So all 9 buildings are holding on to each other. And Fajr Khan, that Einstein of engineering, is the one that invented that. At the same time, you've got a lot of wind up there. So you either build a building like, say, a redwood tree that can stand up to most winds. Or you build a building like a palm tree that could sway in the wind. Sears Tower, palm tree, easily sways 6 inches in all directions. It's designed to sway 3 feet. It has not been tested. As we come to our right, this little building that's right at the river's edge, this is the largest slushy machine in the world. At night, they are making ice. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, warm water from more than 100 buildings downtown is pushed through this building, cooled to almost freezing, and then sent back for their air conditioning units. This is one air conditioner unit for more than 100 buildings downtown. It's ingenious. It's called central cooling. Most of the pipes run underneath the sidewalks downtown. Now, if you take a look at the west side of the river side of the Sears Tower, up to the top, you'll see there are some structures that are hanging off the side of the building. That's up at the observation deck. That's the ledge. Those are glass rooms that have glass windows, glass ceiling, and oh yes, a glass floor. So you literally walk off the side of the building and look down 103 feet, 303 stories. This picture is a picture of your feet, because you'll see the little tiny people in the cars and the trucks down below. And give your camera to somebody you trust to go into the next room and shoot back, so you can see there's just one piece of glass underneath your feet. We're back at the map building. We always say if you can't put your building on the map, put your map on the building. And then beyond it, the white building, where part of it's taller. That's another Harry Weiss building, our architect sailor. That's not a square building. That's 2 right-angle triangle buildings put together at the hypotenuse, one side being taller than the other. And then beyond the bridge, another building we never